All right. Hello. Welcome to the Freetrail podcast. This is Jason Bowman, and I'm here today to continue a special tradition of interviewing Dylan for his post-race report. And I'm especially glad to do this one. I was at the race this year, Hardrock 100 in Silverton, and I'm a better person for having witnessed it. And Dylan and I haven't spoken much since the race so that we could, have a brotherly conversation here. Welcome, Dylan. Hey, baby. How are you?
Hey, J-Bo. Glad we can do this again. I hope it's not the last time we do it. But anyway, good to see you again. And yeah, like I have mentioned to you and maybe in a few other places, the last time we did this after Hardrock 2021, that's probably one of our most popular episodes of all time. So hopefully we can live up to that standard again.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack and just to relive, really. But I figure we should do this in three parts, or there's three things I think we should touch on. One is, of course, just a race report of, what happened, which will inevitably lead into, I hope, some kind of big picture philosophies and ruminations. And then, we should talk about what comes next. So, for the listener, I've been around these races for a long time, but I haven't been able to spectate at one for a long time. And I was really excited to go this year. And I'm, of course, very interested and compelled by the lofty implications of what Dylan does. And in part, that's what I want to uncover a bit of today, because I know how affecting this race especially was for Dylan. And I also know how affecting it was for me and our family and our friends who were there, and also those who were watching from afar. And I actually listened to that interview we did after the last Hardrock to prepare. And a couple things jumped out that I'm gonna quote you back to yourself to start here. Trigger warning. Perfect. Quote, "I don't ever struggle with existential, why am I doing this? I want to quit. This sucks."
Perfect.
Does that hold true today, Dylan?
Oh my gosh, that is the least true thing, especially with the immediate, in the immediate aftermath of this Hardrock 100, which was highlighted with that being in the back of my head, or more so in the front of my head, for the entirety of the 30-hour mission. So yes, the universe was teaching me a lesson there, and that was my smugness came back to haunt me. But that was very much not the case at this year's Hardrock.
Yeah, and another line that I transcribed here says, "When I race the best, it's always when I get to the start line and I can't wait to put myself through something." And what struck me about that, and I think this will be an interesting way in, is that life is almost always the opposite of that, which is to say we're most often unprepared for the things that we have to put ourselves through. We don't get to plan on massive obstacles that just arrive in front of us. So I guess my first question is, what did you learn for putting yourself through something that you weren't necessarily all the way ready for?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so huge question to start here. I guess
as is tradition.
I think first, just to say, I have not been okay after this one. This one really just touched me deeply, really, really hurt physically, psychologically, emotionally. And it's just brought up so many deeper questions about, what am I doing with my life? What am I doing with my career? What am I doing with the sport? How do I want to have an impact? And we'll probably go through all that stuff. I have to say, we did our weekly office hour Zoom call with our Freetrail community yesterday, where we sort of did a bit of a race report and kind of talked about Hardrock and how it unfolded and what some of the learnings were. And I started bawling in front of 80 people, like a complete blubbering emotional basket case. And I hope to not repeat that here.
I hope to repeat it personally.
But I don't know, man. Like that one was not okay. Like that one really freaking hurt. And I could see it from a mile away what was going to happen, and still went into the race with an attitude that, let's try and compete. Let's try and repeat the flow state miracle day that I had in 2021. And it just, in retrospect, was so obvious that that was a really unintelligent, foolish way to approach this year's Hardrock, and that I really set myself up to hurt in the way that I did during the race and that I have over the last 5 days. So, I think top line, super, super proud, super happy that I finished. I wanted to quit so bad for so long. And I'm sure we'll get to this, but I did quit. Like I told people I'm done, like I'm out, and got into a bit of a verbal altercation with people trying to persuade me otherwise. Thank God those people won that argument. I made it to the finish line. Super happy about that. But holy shit, did it come at a cost? And now, holy shit, am I like stewing in existential question marks?
Yeah, good. And that seems to be, from a distance, it seems like that stewing and existential question marks is something that is shared amongst all the participants, excuse me, of the sport. And I guess just for a bit of initial context for the listener is Dylan did set 2 PRs on this race. And the first was a career best, which is to say longest effort at 30 hours and 25 minutes. And the second record, as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but number of times crying on course.
I've never wept during a race before. And certainly, yeah, that was a first for me.
So let's get into just a little bit of like the day. It seems to me like there are 3 kind of crux moments that I want you to go through, and maybe you can just talk us through these. But the first is getting into Ouray, and the second is getting into Chapman. Ouray is mile, I think, 55.
It's like 58.
58. The second is getting into Chapman, which is mile 82. And then the third moment is getting to the river and also to the finish. So let's just kind of go through the day a little bit. Take us through those things or any other things that stand out in your memory.
Well, starting from the beginning, last time we recorded this type of episode, Jabo, or before or after the Hardrock 2021, in that post-race episode, I told you that just like I knew at the start line I was ready for something. I knew I had a special day in me, and physically I was super fit, super acclimatized, in mountain training mode. Psychologically, I'd been waiting for a decade for my chance to arrive at that start line. And those confluence of factors put me in a position to have the race of my life, one of the races of my life. This year, I did not feel that same energy at the start line. And Harmony and Ryan even commenting after the fact, who have been at both of these races, that coming through Cunningham, which is the first crew point at mile 9, very early in the race, that in 2021, I crossed the little creek there with a huge smile on my face, just looking like I was having the time of my life. And that already in Cunningham, I was flustered, didn't look like I was filled with that joy and spirit that you really do need in order to perform at your best at Hardrock. Going back a little bit further, one of the things that I said in some of my pre-race interviews and that I was genuinely feeling was like a deep sense of nervousness. And I never get nervous ever for races. Like I usually have that instinct of how it's going to go. And either way, I can find peace internally and get to a start line without like an overwhelming sense of like fear and nervousness. I was feeling that this year, which was bizarre. And I think that was sort of like my subconscious screaming to me, bro, you are not ready for this. Like, this is Hardrock, bro. You don't just like show up at Hardrock and hope for the best, and bank on your experience and like just like hope that a miracle happens. You just don't do that. And I have been in the sport long enough to know to be smarter than that. I didn't train enough to race in the style that I chose to. Also, in those early miles, I just wasn't feeling it. I missed a turn early. I was just kind of in my own head. Physically, I wasn't feeling great. I was troubleshooting and problem solving way too early. I just never was in a groove ever. And so by the time you get to Ouray, that first point, the accumulated fatigue of 60 miles on the Hardrock course of troubleshooting in a historically hot, hard day finally caught up to me. And also, I think there's a psychological thing of like, you see your crew, and you can sort of let your guard down and like the crisis just kind of happens, because you're like in a safe space. And that's what happened at Ouray. You were there. Maybe you tell the audience what you saw and I can then go give my side.
Ooh, yeah, that was the worst I've ever seen you at a race. I'm going to get emotional. Well, I think what's also so important for the listener or the casual fan is to recognize like how truly infinite this course is. And of course, I had been to the San Juans before, but not for a long time. And I'm so glad that I got out on the course earlier in the day. Hank Mustang and I hiked up to 13,000 feet to see you come through American Basin, which was just such a wonderful experience in a vacuum, but also just during the race, it was so much cooler because it really put into perspective how infinite this undertaking is. Whereas you climb 33,000 feet of elevation, you're above tree line most of the day. It's absolutely stunningly beautiful, but almost in an unsettling way where you're really put in your place. And I felt that. And I think that maybe led to the immensity of my reaction and seeing you at Ouray. But yeah, you came in and plopped down in the chair, and then suddenly there were 50 people in a semicircle around us, most of whom had cameras and phones out, and you were basically just repeating how fucking terrible you felt over and over. But then you started shaking and you started rubbing your eyes, and I could kind of tell that you just weren't really awake behind your face in a way that seemed unsettling. And then you told us that you had hit your head, you had taken a digger, your right arm was kind of covered in dirt and had a couple scrapes here and there. So yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I was legitimately worried about you continuing, which I've never experienced before, but I also wanted you to get out of the aid station because of how many people were around and because you had started shaking. So I basically said, like, let's stand up and start walking. And we did that and walked up Camp Bird Road just a little bit. And I'll hand it back to you. But the thing that really stayed with me after that is for the next hour, at least, I really regretted not looking in your eyes and saying, hey, it's okay if you want to quit. Like, that's okay. And yes, your family is here and all your friends are here, but we're just sitting here chilling and we're here to do whatever, and that's fine. So that was the perspective of the crew. And then I couldn't really stop thinking about you going up because, of course, what happens after Ouray is a vertical mile, like 5,600 feet of climbing in less than 10 miles. So take us through that.
Well, Harmony did say to me in Ouray, like, listen, do the right thing. You don't need to keep going. You have nothing to prove. And for whatever reason, I walked out of there with Topher Gaylord, my homeboy, guy who's paced me now a couple of times over Virginia's Pass at Hardrock, a guy who I deeply respect and admire. And, immediately upon leaving the aid station, I was just overcome with the desire to turn around and walk back, just sort of like, what are you doing here? And that was sort of what I was communicating to Topher too, this poor bastard who had to listen to me just bitch and moan for such a long time. And basically what I communicated to him is exactly what I said earlier, is like, dude, like, why do I keep doing this? Like, I can't just bank on the fact that I've done a bunch of these races and I've been in the sport for a long time and show up at Hardrock and think everything's going to be cool, you know, just because I had a good day in 2021. Like, in order to race at the level that I want to, I need to be committed. And I haven't been committed as an athlete since Hardrock 2021. In fact, everybody who listens to this will know the feeling of when you're just in your groove as an athlete, where the training's coming easy, when it feels like your body is absorbing all the training, recovering well. You've got a psychological energy and enthusiasm about getting out the door every day. And even on the hard ones, when you got a big workout to do, you're like feeling jazzed about it. You get through it and you feel like you're getting better and better. I have not had that feeling in 2 years, man. And it's because like my life force, my energy is just going in a different direction. And this fundamental tension that I've had of like pretending to still be a pro athlete and like being a dad and a business owner and everything else that I have going on, those two things, they just can't coexist anymore. And I'm sure we'll come to a point where we talk about what's next. And obviously I don't think we'll make any decisions right here, right now, but like, that's what I just feel in the aftermath of this race. And that Topher and I talked about leaving Ouray. As we walked up the road, we saw the Japanese photographers who were there from Goldwyn multiple times. They had driven up the road to just document me traipsing up the hill. And of course, every time I saw them, I was like, I just want to jump in their truck. I want to get in their car and I want to drive back down to Ouray and I want to quit. And we kept going. And we got to the top of Virginia's Pass. And as we got higher and higher, for whatever reason, the altitude really kicked the shit out of me this year at Hardrock. And this goes to just lack of, preparation and things like that, I think. But when we got to the top of Virginia's Pass and sat at Kroger's Canteen and saw Joe Grant and the team up there, I said to Joe, dude, I don't know how I'm going to leave Telluride. Like, I don't know how I'm going to leave Telluride. Like, this is so bad. And I just want to quit. I don't know how I'm going to leave. And he just said, dude, like, just keep going one step at a time, whatever. And we make our way out of the aid station there, and it's super steep and precipitous immediately. And then you sort of do a little traverse, and then it gets pretty steep, but smoother as you make your way down into Telluride. And the last couple miles into the aid station, because it was a smoother downhill trail, we were losing elevation. I started to feel a little bit better. I started to move a little bit better. So by the time we got to Telluride, it wasn't as hard for me to leave Telluride as I anticipated it to be. Everybody who was there said that I looked better than I did at Ouray, et cetera. And then leaving Telluride with Rich Lockwood, my new pacer, things unraveled violently going up Oscar's Pass to the point where I was having a legitimate crisis and really, really doubted whether I could get off the mountain, period. So maybe I'll pause there, but that's how things evolved after Ouray.
Yeah, and I was there in Telluride, and you did look much better, but it was probably 4 hours from Ouray to Telluride. I actually am not sure if that's accurate, but during that time we were all, it was a 50-50 in our minds whether or not you were going to continue. And maybe actually this is a good time to pause to talk about the ethos of Hardrock. It's such a, in my mind, different race than other ultras, in part because it's not called a race, it's called a run. And the director doesn't call himself a race director. He calls himself a run director. And you get 48 hours to finish instead of like the 30 that is usual, it seems like, in 100-mile races. So I want you to speak to the difference that inspires in you and inspired in you in this particular race. Because one thing I'll add is that there's always an elite group of people in these 100-mile efforts that are the ones that are trying to actually win the race. But that is such a small percentage of the people that toe the line. And most of the other people that are there are really just trying to finish. And it seems whereas in some races, it's not, shunned was the word that comes to mind. It's not necessarily shunned to not finish. But at this race, it feels like there is a different kind of ethos and a different kind of maybe pressure to not quit. And I wonder if you can speak to that, just to the spirit of Hardrock or the way that it differs from other races.
Yeah, totally. So this was one of the things that I was just trying to keep in mind in the days leading up to the race, where I was overcome with this nervousness and fear. Because I just know Hardrock is such an absolute monster. You mentioned it earlier, but you use the word immensity. And it is such a huge, immense challenge and course that it's difficult to truly articulate to people who have not been to the San Juans. And at the same time, it is a sacred, beautiful opportunity that every self-respecting trail runner wants to experience. And so when you have that sacred opportunity, you have to do it justice. You have to honor that opportunity. And you do, at least I felt an obligation. Like, you can't quit, right? Like, if you quit, you are stealing an opportunity from somebody who has been trying for 10 years to get into this race. And I definitely felt that. One of the things I posted before the race is just like that I wanted to embody the Hardrock spirit in my race. And so when things did unravel, like, I was thinking that, like, dude, this is Hardrock. This isn't a race. This is you against the mountains. Like, don't worry about those guys ahead of you. Don't worry about the people who are absolutely, I'm sure, closing the gap behind you. Like, this is Hardrock. This is a run. This isn't a race. The other thing is, it's wild and tough. Like, you got to be tough. You got to be tough. This is hard. You got to be tough. And so those were the things that I was sort of thinking to myself until it got to a point where it was like, I'm fucked. This is over. Like, I physically can't do this. And that was what happened up on Oscar's Pass. But I think, to your point, yes, like, when you get into Hardrock and things get hard, for most people, they've spent such a long time trying to get into the event that you can't access a deeper level of determination at the moments where you would otherwise maybe pack your bags and go home. And, I do also think that the spirit of, like, it's you against the mountains, it's you against the course, not you against competitors, does make Hardrock unique. That being said, for sure, I was there to try and compete against competitors. And, there is like a little bit of a, I don't know, inauthenticity in that, sometimes you have to sort of like balance those two spirits that, between being competitive and being kind of like on a personal journey against the mountains. But yeah, I mean, those were some of the thoughts that were going through my head as it became clear to me that this was not going to be the smooth day like I had in 2021. Like, this was going to be a day where I did need to look for reasons to keep going.
So, yeah, one of the things that occurred to me in Ouray, because of course we've had this conversation after races, we've gotten deep into the kind of the weeds of the philosophy of the thing, in terms of the mental fortitude that it takes and how much the attitude plays a role in the quality of the experience. But a thought that I had at Ouray is, I'm not sure that you realized you wanted to win until it was obvious you weren't going to. And I guess my question is, do you think that's what you were dealing with in Ouray? And kind of to tag on to that, what is the difference, or where is the line between discomfort and disability And how do you, in the moment, ascertain where your decision making is coming from in terms of whether or not to continue?
What was the first part again?
Did you know that you wanted to win?
Okay, yeah. Okay, so this is what I wanted to say when you brought that up. Definitely in the back of my mind, I was like, listen, you're the fastest American on this course. You're 37. Like, Francois, Killian are not here, right? Like, if you're ever going to have a chance at winning Hardrock, it's this year, right? And also in my career, like, that's the thing that I lack, right? Like, I've been a solid athlete for 15 years. It's something I take a lot of pride in. And I do want to come around to talking about this in a little bit, but I've been like a solid, consistent contender on the international circuit for a while, but I do not have like a win at Hardrock or a win at Western States. Like, I can compete for podiums, but like winning at Hardrock would be like the ultimate way for me to, like, I don't know, not necessarily wrap up my career, but it would make me feel really proud to have that. And I just felt like, okay, like, this is probably your best opportunity, right? Like, this is probably it. And I also, at the same time, should have acknowledged, like, dude, you did not do the training necessary to even consider yourself a factor in today's race. But, I've been a competitor my whole life. I've been, a competitor in this sport for 15 years. And yeah, I'm not ashamed to say that, like, I did hope, like, for a miracle on a miracle day, that the universe would just reward my hard work and sacrifices over a decade and a half and maybe open up a miraculous, mysterious fitness that would allow me to compete for the win. And as that did slip away, yeah, that's when you're like, okay, now what are you out here for? And for the entirety of the day, like, from the earliest miles, I knew, like, this is not the day. Like, this just doesn't feel like 2021. And it was a hard day in general with the heat and the snow and things like that. And so from an early point in the race, I did have to change the psychology and start looking for reasons of, like, why are you out here? And anyway, like, I continued to, like, try and compete through that, like, first half of the race. And then to the second part of your question of, like, when do you know, like, the line between, was it like,
well, that'll be a good way to get us up, Chapman. So the Discomfort did turn to disability.
yeah,
You left Telluride and you have to hike up again, like almost a vertical mile to 13,000 feet in the pitch black of the middle of the night. Take us up and down Oscars.
okay. So Rich Lockwood and I leave Telluride and start walking out of town. And it's sort of like very gentle uphill to start before you start climbing in earnest. And again, it's a 4,500 foot climb out of Telluride to the top of Oscars Pass, which is like 13,100 feet. And the higher we got, the worse I got. And I had vocalized some skepticism about my ability to make it to the finish line to Topher, but was able to, like, continue to sort of believe that it was possible to get to the finish line. And I was troubleshooting the whole time, right? Like, I'm eating, I'm taking electrolytes, I'm taking amino acids, I'm rehydrating, like, feeling like I'm doing what it would take to navigate a low point. Getting through Telluride and then halfway up Oscars Pass, that's when I really started vocalizing, like, I am not in a good place. Like, this is not okay, Rich, just so you know, like, I'm really struggling right now and I don't know what to do. And at that point, like, really the only thing you can do is keep moving forward. And then near the top, it just was so bad. I was taking like 3 to 5 steps at a time and then just like leaning on my poles and like gasping for air and just like, I can't physically do this. Like, I was done. I'm 78 miles into the Hardrock at this point. And
is that scary?
100%, like terrifying. Like I can't get to Chapman right now. Like I definitely can't also turn around and walk all the way back to Telluride. Like this is bad. This is really bad. It was also really cold up there for the first time all day. There's a ton of water crossing. So, you know, your feet and shoes are like soaking wet with frozen water. I got my jacket on with my hood up. Runners are starting to come past me. Like Courtney came past me and Javi Dominguez came past me. Arlen Glick came past me. And eventually, thank God, I get over the top of Oscar's Pass. And up there, you get like a small bit of cell phone reception, which I knew because I had texted Harmony from up there earlier in the week to let her know that I would be down in Telluride as I was doing a training run on the course and she was going to pick me up. So when I was up there, I took my phone out and I texted you, Harmony, Ryan, and Dad, all the same thing, saying, I'm dropping out in Chapman. I can hardly walk, period. Send. And we just walked. We walked downhill to Chapman, which is like a hyper technical, super steep, just miserable trail. And when I got to Chapman, man, I was overcome with the deepest relief, like a sense of genuine joy of like, oh my God, I made it. Like I'm safe and thank God I'm here. I can finally quit. Like that's what that was my attitude entering the Chapman aid station is holy shit. Thank God. Total relief and elation. I can finally quit.
And then what?
And then entering the aid station, I met a man named Bill Shum, who will become an important character in the story, who was the aid station captain. And what I said to Bill was, hey, I'm done. I need a place to lie down for a little while. And so he shuttled me into a tent with a couple cots in it. And upon entering the tent, I saw Avery Collins was always also in there, dead asleep, fast asleep with like a buff around his face, like bundled in some sleeping bags. And so, you know, I was sort of thinking like, okay, well, at least it's not just me, and laid down and sort of took some time to rest, fell asleep myself for probably like 30 minutes. And then I woke up and I knew that Yuta and Oscar, the two Japanese photographers, were there in Chapman because I saw them as I was coming in. I told them, I'm done. I got to just rest for a little bit and then I'm out. And I asked Bill in the tent, hey, could you grab those Japanese photographers and bring them in here? And he did. And I said, hey, Yuta, I need a ride back to Silverton. And Bill, this is where it's hard. He goes, it's amazing. He goes, shut up, go back to sleep. Shut up, go back to sleep. Like he was pissed. Like, dude, you were not dropping out. Shut up, go back to sleep. And I said, bro, get off my case. Like, I don't just drop out of races here. Okay. Like I physically can't do it. Like I take this shit seriously. I wouldn't just drop because things are hard. I physically can't. Get off my case. He said, shut up, go back to sleep. And I did. I went back to sleep for like 90 minutes probably. And then we woke up. And while I was there, like, it turns out it was Avery's crew chief, which I didn't realize at the time. But he like rubbed they took my shoes and socks off and dried them out. Avery's crew chief like gave me a leg massage because it was really my legs. Like I felt like I couldn't even walk up or downhill, you know? And that's like what I texted you guys. Like, I can't even walk. Like I can't make it. I can't make it. So they gave me a leg massage. They gave me like these warm water bottles that I had like tucked in my jacket, like in my armpits. And I was like feeling all cozy. And then I woke up, I drank 3 cups of coffee. I ate a donut with some sprinkles on it. And Rich, the hero, just was sitting there for 2.5 hours while I was in this catatonic state. And I woke up at probably like 5:15. And it was like, are we doing this? Like, are we actually going to try to do this? Because I had already felt like once I left Telluride, it was like, okay, you got to make it. And then it was like, okay, I can't make it. So I was worried that if I left Chapman, that the same thing was going to happen, right? But at least I had this feeling in the back of my mind of like, okay, well, at least now you can turn around and come back to Chapman. Like if you try, you can turn around and come back. And at least you will have tried. And Rich, to his immense credit, was totally game, after barely walking up and over Oscar's Pass. It was like, let's go, man. Like, I'm ready. Let's go. And so we left right at dawn, which was poetic because I didn't have to put my headlamp back on. And it was a new day. It was a new day.
And what happened before you left the aid station?
So the last thing I was going to say is Bill, my guardian angel and my arch nemesis. Once we got kitted back up and ready to go, he walked us out of the aid station like a 1/4 mile or 1/2 mile to where the aid station used to be in this meadow before you cross a river and start climbing up towards Grand Swamp Pass. And I just said to Bill, bro, thank you, thank you, thank you. I cannot believe I'm leaving right now because, again, 2.5 hours before I arrived, so happy that I was there so that I could quit and not spend one more step on the Hardrock course because it had just absolutely taken everything from me. And I said, bro, thank you, thank you, thank you. What is your name? And Bill said, don't worry about it. Chapman Aid Station, which was just like, again, the most beautiful, poetic, appropriate answer in that moment of just like the Hardrock spirit of don't worry about it. I did my job. Now go do yours. And it's not about me. It's, it's about the team at the aid station. Like, we're here. We're volunteers to get you guys out on the course to do what you came here to do, which is kiss the rock. And anyway, like, it just was so powerful. And I told Dale about it after I finished, Dale, the run director. And after I finished, he came into the gym as I was laying on a cot just to chat with me. And I told him about it. And I could see like this twinkle in Dale's eye, like, this is Hardrock, right? And then the next day, much to Bill's chagrin, but to my joy, Dale told the story at the award ceremony of what I had told him, which is this story of Bill he didn't use my name, but he said getting runners through the aid station. When somebody asked for his name, he said, don't worry about it. Chapman Aid Station. And then we got out of there, bro. And I made it. I just kept walking and we made it.
And we later learned that Bill has a 100% record at getting people out of that aid station, whereas no one has dropped on his watch at Chapman in either direction.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been thinking about this too. And one of the things I said to Bill is like, dude, I've been in the game for a while, like that was the most powerful thing in my career. And what I said to him was just like, dude, I need to pay this forward, like he showed the stats on our office hours Zoom call yesterday. And I think it was 379 of 379 runners over the course of the last 3 years have all been through Chapman, 0 drops. And so I've just been thinking about ways in which I can pay that forward. And a few things come to mind. Number one, if like Ryan or Rich gets into the race next year, I can do my part to help get those guys through. But also if neither of them do, maybe I can go to Chapman, or maybe I can go to Maggie's, because it'll change direction. And so Chapman's really early in the day. And maybe I can maybe I can be Bill Jr., go out there and just frickin' get in verbal altercations with runners who want to drop and go, shut up, go back to sleep.
Well, just also as your brother, let me remind you that there are hundreds of people in this sport that would say that you're already paying it forward in immense ways that are bringing a lot of meaning and inspiration to so many people. So let's get to the end of the race and then we can kind of turn the page a little bit. But so again, from the crew perspective, everyone, when someone's running a fast time in this direction, the aid stop at Chapman is around 2 or 3 in the morning. When we knew Dylan was going to be several hours behind, we made the decision not to go to Chapman, which we were retrospectively very happy for because we probably would have driven him home.
I was pissed at you guys in the moment too.
Yeah, I know, we could tell. But what that means from a crew perspective is that that is a night with no sleep, which means we go straight from Chapman back to Silverton, at which point Dylan might finish at 5 to 6 in the morning. But we knew that wasn't going to happen this time. So we all got a little bit of ultra beauty rest, woke up in the morning, checked Twitter. Okay, Dylan took a nap at Chapman. He left. Okay, good. Which means we had the whole morning to kind of get a coffee, get a breakfast, and then go wait at the river crossing, which is a special part of the course. We took a swim in the river. We walked up the trail a little bit. Our mom and dad were there, a bunch of friends, and we just started hanging out and kind of waiting for Dylan, who, according to the GPS tracker, was still very much lumbering his way downhill into the river crossing. And then it was a very emotional moment when we saw you from across the river. And I want you to just take us through that to the finish.
Yeah. So going back a couple of miles, Rich and I came over the top of the final climb, which is Putnam Ridge, which again is just like the most ridiculously hard way to end a race. If the final 500-600 feet of climbing is just like marching up this wall of alpine tundra off trail. And then you drop down into the final drainage in the downhill that takes you to the river crossing. And that trail is also like horrendous, like miles of talus fields. But at the top of that final climb, and there's a great picture of this, Rich and I hugged, and it was like, oh my God, I am going to make it. Like, I can't believe it. I've just been like wanting to quit for whatever it was at that point, 28 hours. And I'm going to make it. And then eventually, slowly but surely, you keep going downhill and you get to the river. And it's like, you finally have a sense of civilization for the first time since Telluride, really. And yeah, of course, all you guys were there. You, Henry, Mom, Dad, Ryan, Harmony, Rhodes, like everybody. Henry, I said. And I was sort of expecting you guys all to be there, but it was like, wow, it was worth it, like everybody made a point to be here. I mean, it's funny because Mom, a few weeks ago when I saw her, when I came down to Boulder for a wedding, she was like, yeah, I just can't miss it. She was like, it feels like you're in the golden hour of your career. And I was like, yeah, it kind of does, doesn't it? But like, also, fuck you, but also like, yeah, like having you and Mom and Dad all there for the first time since probably like maybe Western States back in the day. it was special. And then, you know, I just covered those last 2 miles. And then, of course, one of the things that really gave me the motivation to keep going is because I've like just had this vision in my head of like carrying roads to the rock, you know, and like being a dad and this being like a new chapter. He was 11 months that day, meaning he's almost a year old. And so like rounding the final corner, giving Rich a big hug and just thanking him profusely for babysitting me all the way to the finish line through the lowest moment of my trail running career. And then picking up my baby and walking down the finishing chute with Harmo. It was just like, it was worth it. And maybe like it was how it was supposed to be, you know, and that just like kind of gave me, again, just like an immense feeling of pride and relief of just like, wow, like I can't believe I made it. And I think that's exactly what I said to Dale, is just like, I can't believe it. I can't believe it, when he gave me my finishing medal. And anyway, we got it done.
So this is how I kind of want to turn the page and just do a little thinking out loud with each other, because this is what's really interesting to me is the emotion behind it, because you were in tears when you crossed the river and you went to go hug mom. And then she looked right at me and said, he's crying. And then she was crying, and then I was crying, and I had taken a video of you crossing the river and just sent it to like a few random friends who I had been keeping in touch with who were interested. And they responded that they were crying. And so what I want to pay attention to is that, you know, I guess when I get emotional, I try to pay attention to why, because I think in part, you know, that's what we're here for and what we want the most, both above the surface and beneath the surface. And that is just to be moved and to feel. And I think there's a very valid question in this sport, which is why. You know, why do people do this? Why do people put themselves at this edge? And I think there's an argument that involves cheap thrills, even though they're not very cheap, which would then lead to a second argument, which is like, honestly, a little bit of sick masochism. And then there's another argument, which is, you know, exploration of the truth of suffering. And it takes a very specific kind of person to put themselves through this kind of pain. And I want to unpack this idea of why a little bit more. And I guess one of the things, and I was talking to Henry about this in one of our many hours in the car and just this epic surroundings. And I guess I have something of a theory that what you guys are really doing is interfacing with a scaled down version of existence at its most fundamental. And I think, and I guess this is a question, but I think what you're doing is ultimately trying to prove to yourselves and also to the world that you have what it takes to survive. And I think this is one of the things that makes onlookers get emotional. And that is just the simplicity that it's worth it to try. There's I think, very scary question at the heart of all of us. Usually beneath the surface, but definitely that also comes above the surface at times. And that is, why do we try? Knowing as we do that all of our efforts will not ultimately save us. Why do we continue? And my question is, does that ring true to you? And also, as a part of that, describe the golden hour and the emotion that is endemic to that.
Yeah, I think you're right in that, like, we're seeking like a self-transcendent experience, right? Of just like, this is so out of the ordinary that it takes you out of all your patterns and the stories you tell yourself and the just mundane ho-hum normal day-to-day existence, that there's like something super powerful about the sport in that respect. And I think that's why it carries this like almost quasi spiritual nature to it, and why the people who are in the sport decide to like devote their lives to it, right? Is because it genuinely does. I mean, I hear from people all the time now who are like trail running, because we have this funny, sort of cliche, fun saying that's tongue in cheek that trail running will save the world, right? And so I hear from a bunch of people now who are like, it's true, trail running saved my life, and without it, I'd be, in jail or dead or divorced or whatever. And like, there is something about it that is deeply like self-transcendent and self-improving. And that's like, as I've thought about this finish from a few days ago, like, there's no question that finish will have a deep personal lasting impact on me. Not only just like the memory of it and the, emotion of it, but like the fact that I made it under those circumstances on a day where I knew it was over, and to the point where I was like yelling at a volunteer because he was trying to make me continue. And, maybe that shows up somewhere else, next time something gets hard. And yeah, like to tie it to golden hour too, that's when you really do see the people who are out there with the most pure intentions, right? And I do want to come back to this, like, what comes next type thing, but I did go to golden hour, of course, 5:00 on Sunday morning, and probably saw 10 people finish in that hour. And each of those individuals, of course, has been out on the course for whatever it was, 18 hours longer than I was. And not only were they moving a lot slower and confronting the exact same immensely difficult course, but they have the psychological challenge of like knowing that they could get timed out at any aid station. Like, they're getting chased by a, avatar of like a grim reaper that could pull them off the race course at any time, including at a time when they've been out there for 45 hours or something, right? They could get to the Putnam aid station and get timed out, right? And it's heroic, and you can't help but just feel an immense amount of respect for those individuals, because, they do embody the Hardrock spirit, and they're not out there to try and win or finish on the podium or, break any records. They're out there for that same sort of self-transcendence reason. And yeah, I don't know, man, like, one of the things I've been thinking about is like, okay, what comes next, and being where I am and having our little business with Freetrail and stuff, like, that's my next chapter, and I'm so happy that it is, because I can remain as ingrained and involved in the sport as I have been during my professional athletic career. Like, I won't lose that. And just being around the community is just like immensely impactful and spiritual. And the last month, having gone to Western States and Hardrock, it's just like, how the fuck do you go back to normal life after this? It's like deep, deep experiences, and it's a shame that not everybody gets to enjoy that, because it does change you. And even those days that are so traumatic and so hard, like, holy shit, thank God I got to do that.
And I think that's I think everyone does know that, actually. But I think that's the thing that's really interesting, is the 100 miles guarantees that there's a low point. It's like a 10-day meditation retreat is better than a 3-day meditation retreat because you are guaranteed to have a low point. And also in our lives, we're guaranteed to have a low point. And I think that's one of the things that is so affecting about this sport and so inspiring about this sport, even and especially to those who don't run, is just this juxtaposition with the energy of achievement and the energy of determination and of perseverance. In the same way that it is deeply affecting to see, say, for example, a single mother working 3 jobs so that she can take care of her kids. And that is ultimately this very human, deeply ingrained understanding that it is worth it to try. And I want to bring this together actually by talking about the myth of Sisyphus, is what I have been thinking about this whole time. Of course, the myth of Sisyphus is this figure in Greek mythology who was punished by the gods and condemned to repeat forever the same meaningless task of pushing a giant boulder up a mountain only to see it roll down again.
Yeah.
And this is what he does every day. He carries the boulder up to the top of the mountain, and as soon as he gets there, he's assured that the rock will roll back down, and the next day he has to start over and do it again. And it's such a wonderful metaphor for existence. And Albert Camus, of course, is the one who wrote the book on it and very much popularized it in the kind of modern philosophical sense. And I was just reading through that book again, and I want to read a couple things from it, and we can get into what comes next too as a part of this. But one thing that Camus says is, man stands face to face with the irrational. He feels within him his longing for happiness and for reason. The absurd lies in the juxtaposition between the fundamental human need to attribute meaning to life, as well as the unreasonable silence of the universe that comes in response.
Wow.
So Camus claims that this is the philosophy of absurdism, right? And he claims that in the realization of the absurd, or in truly dedicating yourself to absurd undertakings, requires a revolt. And this is a little bit grim, but this is, in his estimation, the thing that you have 2 choices. One is no longer living, and the other is this revolt against the absurdism. And I guess this is kind of a lofty claim, but I think ultra running is this one of the most purest kinds of revolt. It's like you guys are saying, oh yeah, gods, check this out. Watch how hard I can roll this boulder uphill.
Yep.
And Camus sees Sisyphus as this hero, one who lives life to the fullest and one who hates death, and one who is, like all of us, condemned to this meaningless task of waking up every day and trying our hardest, even though we know that doing our best will not save us. And so in some way, what happens here is this lesson that, and I'll stop pontificating here in a moment and turn it into a question, I promise, but what counts is just how much we can live and how much we can feel and how much we can be moved. And also, with how much style we can roll the boulder uphill, with how much truth we can encircle ourselves with people and with experiences and with vistas and with solitude. And also this understanding that no matter what we do, there is no lasting satisfaction. And you get to the end of the race and you set a course record, and it's like still the next day you have to wake up and make breakfast. And the same thing is true with complete and utter defeat. Like no misery is final. And the end of the book of The Myth of Sisyphus by Camus is this line, quote, "The struggle itself towards the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy." So my question to you is, as the heroic and also neurotic person that you are, what do you see as your next boulder? Do you want to continue running? And if so, in what capacity do you see yourself doing that?
Holy shit. Was that like the biggest and best podcast question in the history of podcasting?
Yeah, I got really high on coffee this morning so I could think about that and write it down.
Wow. First of all, before we get to that, you and I have always been prone to excess in all things, like you with your meditation retreats and cycling, and me with my running, and us together with our long nights at the bars. And I don't know, like there's something about just going huge, right? Going huge in all aspects is like just so addicting and so fun. And yeah, it is also absurd. We're fighting against absurdity. And yeah, so what's next? So going back to when I was with Topher on the course, one of the things I was just saying to him is just like, man, I hate this. Like I used to be the guy who was like steady Eddie, dependable, consistent performer, right? Now I'm the dude who's fucking exploding halfway through the race and who's likely not going to make it to the finish line. Like, I don't like this version of me. Like, what am I doing? What am I doing showing up at Hardrock, not trained and hoping for a miracle? In sports, you always get what you deserve. And that's one of the things that I just love about it and why I've always been an athlete is because like you can see the work you put in have a result, right? And then when you screw up, you deserved it, you learn from it, you course correct the next time, you hope to get better. But if you show up at Hardrock not sufficiently trained and like try to compete to win the race, of course you're going to blow up in Ouray, you fucking idiot. Like seriously. And I'm just so pissed at myself about that. Like, cause there's no reason that I couldn't have taken the more the Jeff Browning, Paul Terranova tact, or like, run a similar time that like Javi and Courtney did, just by running more conservatively, more intelligently, and just acknowledging where I am as an athlete right now, not just like holding on to Debo 2021, like I knew in my soul, I'm not that athlete right now. I also know in my soul that athlete is still in me. And if I get the chance, I would love an opportunity to really buckle down, focus, and take a swing at something. That being said, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to show up at races. I'm not going to be in this half in, half out situation anymore. And this fundamental tension that I mentioned earlier between my life as a professional athlete and my life as a father, small business owner, like it's just not been possible to have those two things coexist simultaneously. And maybe it's a personal failing of mine. Like, just seeing Tyler Green finish second at Western States again, also with a son who's like, 6 weeks younger than Rhodes. I'm like, shit, why can't I get it together? Like, I just have not been able to get myself at a point where I'm like really focused and disciplined to the level that I need to be to perform at the level that I always have in the sport. And the fact that I still have the expectation that I can just ride whatever talent I have and whatever experience I've amassed to these spectacular performances is just idiotic. You get what you deserve. And so that's one of the main takeaways from this race is like, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I'm not going to like put myself through that physical and emotional ringer in order just to get another finish. And I'm, again, very proud of what happened at Hardrock and the fact that I was able to find the resolve to get to the finish line. But I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to do that again. And like, I'm not saying I'm retiring or whatever, but like, if trail running is interesting because like, it's not like most sports where at a certain point you do kind of need to make a decision. Do you continue or do you retire? If it were that type of sport, this moment would be that moment for me of Tom Brady after winning that Super Bowl with the Bucs and retiring and then coming backtracking on it and coming back for another ride. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I don't know what comes next for me. I'd really like one or two more good swings. And I also know, like, I'm 37, right? Probably my best years are coming close to being in the rearview mirror. But at the same time, Bernat, who finished second over the weekend's 42, Javi Dominguez, who finished third's 48, Jeff Browning's almost 52, that legend, still performing. And I would really like to be able to do that type of stuff too. But at a certain point, I really need to just be realistic with myself and stop setting myself up for just massive disappointment. So,
well, I'd really like to go back to Hardrock in the other direction next year. So,
well, I guess
I hope Ryan or Rich or someone is running.
Well, it's funny.
Well, yeah, we're an aspirational animal, and I think, in my own experience, I am never more happy when I have a very clear objective aspiration, which is accompanied by a very clear set of tasks that lead towards that aspirational object. And of course, as we know, the parts of the brain that are associated with wanting are not connected to the parts of the brain that are associated with having. And so there's this, like, the cliche is absolutely true, which makes it the cliche, which is that the journey is the destination. And I think that knowing you as I do, you are not satiated unless there's a gigantic mountain of some sort directly in front of your field of vision. And I trust that the manner in which you find that next mountain will be of benefit to you and to your family and to others. And, so I left Silverton on Sunday night and flew from Montrose to Denver, and where I stepped off the plane to find an absolute cacophonous shit show of millions of people. And then I happened to find a 2.5 hour flight delay, which in the moment definitely struck me as poetic, knowing that you had spent 2.5 hours at Chapman. And I noticed and this isn't a story of my success, but rather a story of inspiration, because I had a choice in that moment, and it was definitely not lost on me how to undertake that moment and those hours. And so what I did was eat an edible. And I sat down and I just, I didn't listen to music, and I didn't read, and I didn't look at the computer, and I just sat at the gate and watched myself get a little bit stoned and felt the hum of impermanence in my body and felt the hum of impermanence surrounding me. And I watched, parents struggle to keep their kids happy, waiting, surrounded by other people. And I watched airline employees get yelled at, and I watched crew members, looking incessantly at their phone. And yeah, I saw this human discomfort of waiting and endurance that is endemic to every single moment. And it was inspiring to be able to sit there, and just understand that is existence. And then, of course, we got a text from Dad the other day that he was coming to a milestone in fundraising at work. And he too likened it to crossing Oscar's Pass in this same way, where he's like, oh, we finally got this last minute funding. I have crossed the pass and I'm through the aid station. So you are so inspiring to everybody, and to be in proximity to this sport, even casually, is just richly meaningful. And whether you finish first or in the golden hour at 47 hours and 59 minutes really is the same gift to all the people that follow you. And I think I speak for so many people when I just say thank you for your determination and your effort and your demonstration that it's worth it to try.
Thank you, bro. Yeah. And I guess I should say too, as we talk about what's next and you talk about that next mountain in front of me, I feel immensely blessed that I know what that next mountain is, and I'm already climbing it. Freetrail is Oscar's Pass too. and it is an immense challenge. And I have spoken very openly on this podcast and in other places about just what a struggle it's been, but also what a joy and what a learning experience it's been and a growth opportunity for me. And I know that long-term, it's a place and a channel through which I can have an impact on this community. And really, that's all I want to do, is be part of the sport, have some kind of an impact, be of service in some way, and make a living at the same time. And if I can do that, if I can figure it out, I can walk off into the sunset as an athlete, happy with how everything has gone, and live my life with a lot of gratitude and a lot of joy, and, a lot of like engagement in the work that I do as an athlete. As that's really what's inspired me since I was, as long as I can remember, it's been sports. And that's always been my thing. And it is kind of sad and nerve-wracking to feel like, okay, well, maybe it's going to be different now. But at the same time, like, I really am filled with energy about the next mountain too. And I really love Freetrail. And it's the core friction and the core challenge that makes me immensely uncomfortable, and that I really need to figure out, is just the tension between those two things, and if they can coexist. And if they can't, so be it. I still have a great life, a great family, a great career, and can move forward as a happy person. But anyway, I just wanted to say that too, because like, I don't want people to feel sorry for me or feel like, that this is the end in any way, right? Like, I genuinely feel like every day is a new beginning, and I've never been more committed and more inspired to be committing my life to this sport and this community. And I view that as a privilege.
Yeah, man. Well, I think this was your best race ever.
If by best you mean worst and slowest, we'll take it. But we made it.
Yeah. And what a gift to be able to, put words to it with you and to be along for the ride all these years.
Yeah. Well, thanks for hosting, bro. And thanks for being there. It was great to have you around throughout the day, and mom and dad too, and Hormone Ryan and Rhodes, and of course Henry Dills, Hank Mustang. It was a great crew, friends and family, and I was feeling the love the whole time. So appreciate it.
Oh yeah. Well, can't wait till the next post race podcast.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much again for hosting and steering the conversation. Hopefully it wasn't too self-interested, navel gazing.
Thank you to the listeners for making it this far.
Therapy. Impermanence.
All right. Love you, man. I'm so proud of you.
Me too.